Moving down Dexter Avenue in Montgomery. To the very right marched Hosea Williams, holding his daughter. I marched next to him. Mrs. King marched next to me. Dr. King marched next to his wife. Dr. Ralph Bunch, the first African-American Nobel Peace Prize winner, marched next to him. And to his right marched Mrs. Abernathy. To her right marched her husband, Ralph Abernathy. And to his right marched John Lewis, who today is United States coming from Georgia.
Welcome back to the channel. This is The Hope, H-O-P-E, helping our people elevate. If you're new here, I want to say I appreciate you for taking the time to dig into this channel. This is a historical channel where we share historical information, past and sometimes lightweight present. To my returning viewers, as I always say, I appreciate you for being here, appreciate you for your support. I wouldn't be able to do this without y'all, so I appreciate y'all the most. Today we're going to talk about how Selma's Bloody Sunday became a turning point in the Civil Rights Movement. The assault on the Civil Rights marchers in Selma, Alabama helped lead to the Voting Rights Act. And so, without holding y'all, we're going to jump straight into it. So make sure y'all hitting that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe so that y'all stay notified whenever I drop a new video. Peace and love.
On behalf of Akuno Sankofa Bay, you know what I'm saying? Jay, where you at? We're trying to help our people elevate. Hope, H-O-P-E. We're giving them hope. We doing what we gotta do, you know. Every day, one step at a time, man. We're gonna make it happen. Helping our people elevate. Yeah. Sometimes I practice focus, thought, and meditate. I'm trying to come with other ways to help our people elevate and seeking knowledge, make me levitate. The lifted mental state is what results from how we orchestrate. This for the family's sake. Let's self-reflect and self-evaluate. And every day, make sure the steps you take, you calculate. Receive a master's fate. I know I can't exist without the hate, but that's okay. I balance that with higher self today. Success is on this way, and after that, my flesh can pass away.
Nearly a century after the Confederacy's gun fell silent, the racial legacies of slavery and Reconstruction continued to reverberate loudly throughout Alabama in 1965. On March 7, 1965, when then 25-year-old activist John Lewis led over 600 marches across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, and faced brutal attacks by oncoming state troopers, footage of the violence collectively shocked the nation and galvanized the fight against racial injustice. The passage of the landmark Civil Rights Act 1964 months earlier had done little in some parts of the state to ensure African Americans of the basic rights to vote. Perhaps no place was Jim Crow's grip tighter than in Dallas County, Alabama, where African Americans made up more than half of the population, yet accounted for just 2% of the registered voters. For months, the efforts of the Students' Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to register black voters in the county seat of Selma had been thwarted. In January 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. came to the city and gave the backing of the Southern Christian Leadership Council to the cause. Peaceful demonstration in Selma and surrounding communities resulted in the arrest of thousands, including King, who wrote to the New York Times, "This is Selma, Alabama. There are more Negroes in jail with me than there are on the voting rolls."
You can see the horses. You can see them. They were ready. Their shoes was shiny, they had everything. Nobody expected Sunday to be bloody because the cameras was there. The whole world was watching.
We thought they were going to be arrested, but instead, Sheriff Clark rode through the crowd on horseback, beating people.
That's when you heard them gas caps, okay? Gas all around you.
The rising racial tension finally bubbled over into bloodshed in the nearby town of Marion on February 18, 1965, when state troopers, club protesters, and fatally shot 26-year-old Jimmy Lee Jackson, an African-American demonstrator trying to protect his mother, who was being struck by police. In response, civil rights leaders plan to take their cause directly to Alabama Governor George Wallace on the 54-mile march from Selma to the state capital of Montgomery. Although Wallace ordered state troopers to use whatever measures are necessary to prevent a march, approximately 600 voting rights advocates set out from Old Chapel AME Church on Sunday, March 7th. King, who had met with President Lyndon Johnson 2 days earlier to discuss voting rights legislation, remained back in Atlanta with his own congregation and planned to join the marchers en route the following day. By a coin flip, it was determined that Hosea Williams would represent the SCLC at the head of the march along with Lewis, an SNCC chairman and future U.S. congressman from Georgia.
Selma organizer Amelia Boynton is among those brutally beaten on the bridge, knocked unconscious by a billy club.
We thought she was dead. The reason we thought she was dead because they put her in a hearse to take her to the hospital.
CBS interrupted the showing of Judgment at Nuremberg on that Sunday night to show those peaceful protesters being beaten on that bridge.
We
Demonstrators reached Edmund Pettus Bridge. The demonstrators marched undisturbed through downtown Selma, where the ghosts of the past constantly permitted the present. As they began to cross the steel arch bridge spanning the Alabama River, the marchers who gazed up could see the name of the Confederate general and reputed Grand Dragon of the Alabama Ku Klux Klan, Edmund Pettus, staring right back at them in big block letters embezzled across the bridge's crossbeam. Once Lewis and Williams reached the crest of the bridge, they saw trouble on the other side. A wall of state troopers, wearing white helmets and slapping billy clubs in their hand, stretched across Route 80 at the base of the span. Behind them were deputies of County Sheriff Jim Clark, some on horseback, and dozens of white spectators waving Confederate flags and giddily anticipating a showdown. Knowing a confrontation awaited, the marchers pressed on in a thin column down the bridge's sidewalk until they stopped about 50 feet away from the authorities. "It would be detrimental to your safety to continue this march," Major John Cloud called out from his bullhorn. "This is an unlawful assembly. You have to disperse. You are ordered to disperse. Go home or go to your church. This march will not continue." "Mr. Major," replied Williams, "I would like to have a word. Can we have a word?" "I've got nothing further to say to you," Cloud answered. This image is an image of SNCC leader John Lewis. He's in a light coat in the center, attempting to ward off the blow as a state trooper swings the club at Lewis's head during an attempted march from Selma to Montgomery on March 7, 1965. Williams and Lewis stood their ground at the front of the line. After a few moments, the troopers with gas masks affixed to their faces and clubs at the ready advanced. They pushed back Lewis and Williams. Then the troopers' pace quickened. They knocked the marchers to the ground. They struck them with sticks. Clouds of tear gas mixed with the screams of terrified marchers and the cheers of reveling bystanders. Deputies on horsebacks charged ahead and chased the gasping men, women, and children back over the bridge as they swung clubs, whips, and rubber tubing wrapped in barbed wire. Although forced back, the protesters did not fight back. Lewis later testified in court that he was knocked to the ground, and the state trooper then hit him in the head with a nightstick. When Lewis shielded his head with his hand, trooper hit Lewis again as he tried to get up. Weeks earlier, King escorted Life magazine photographer Flip Scopes trying to assist protesters knocked to the ground by authorities instead of snapping away. "The world doesn't know this happened because you didn't photograph it," King told Scopes, according to the Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Race Beat. This time, however, television cameras captured the entire assault and transformed the local protest into a national civil rights event. It took hours for the film to be flown from Alabama to Television Network headquarters in New York, but when it aired that night, Americans were appalled at the sight and sounds of a Bloody Sunday.
All the way to Montgomery. And off time, we would stop to rest. Some brought food. It meant that some people were so determined to assist us.
They camped out overnight for 4 different nights. They had a crew that would dismantle the tents, pack them up and move them up to the next campsite. They had a crew that did the same thing with the kitchen, the food, utensils and all that.
Also, there were whites who were determined to holler and discourage those persons who were white who were participating in the march.
But during the course of this campaign, even before the march is finished, Lyndon Baines Johnson takes to the airwaves before a joint session of Congress and announces that he's going to put before Congress a voting rights bill.
Around 9:30 p.m., ABC newscaster Frank Reynolds interrupted the network's broadcast of Judgment at Nuremberg, the star-studded movie that explored Nazi bigotry, war crimes, and the moral capabilities of those who followed orders or didn't speak out against the Holocaust, to air the disturbing newly arrived footage from Selma. Nearly 50 million Americans who had turned into the film's long-awaited television premiere couldn't escape the historical echoes of Nazi stormtroopers and the scene of the rampaging state troopers. The just exposition struck like psychological lightning in American homes, wrote Gene Roberts and Hank Klippenoff in The Race Beat. The connection wasn't lost in Selma either. When the store was finally empty of customers, one local shopkeeper confided in the Washington Star reporter Haynes Johnson about the city's institutional racism. "Everybody knows it's going on, but they try to pretend they don't see it. I saw Judgment at Nuremberg on the Late Show the other night, and I thought it fits right in. It's just like Selma." State troopers watched as marchers crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge over the Alabama River in Selma, Alabama, as part of a civil rights march on March 9, 1965. Outrage at Bloody Sunday swept the country. Sympathizers staged sit-ins, traffic blockades, and demonstrations in solidarity with the voting rights marchers. Some even traveled to Selma, where 2 days later King attempted another march, but to the dismay of some demonstrators, turned back when troopers again blocked the highway at Edmund Pettus Bridge. Finally, after a federal court order permitted the protest, the voting rights marchers left Selma on March 21st under the protection of federalized National Guard troops. 4 days later, they reached Montgomery, with the crowd growing to 25,000 by the time they reached the Capitol steps. The event in Selma galvanized public opinion and mobilized Congress to pass the Voting Rights Act, which President Johnson signed into law on August 6, 1965. Today, the bridge that serves as the backdrop of Bloody Sunday still bears the name of a white supremacist, but now is a symbolic civil rights landmark.
Determined to foil every move they make.
You can never whip these boys if you don't keep you and them separate. I found that out in Birmingham. You've got to keep the white and the black separate.
So this was a man who was defiant and brutal, and it would eventually create the spectacle of suffering